Okay. So here's my scene. I have all my characters, they're rigged in a way that I can animate them. And these characters are simplified. They don't have the rig that you guys have, that you guys made. These are just moving the characters forward at the base. I've also put them on layers. I can turn off the board layer. I can turn off the characters, but I probably need to create a con layer too. So I'm just going to real quickly right click and create a new layer, call this cons. All right, so I can turn those off and on or restrict them as I want to. I don't want to accidentally select the board, so I'm going to restrict that now that I've assigned its texture. In fact, if the texture is going to be distracting to me, maybe I just hit 5. So I'm just focusing on the characters. Wow, these look terrible. What's going on with my characters? Unrestrict those for a second. There we go. Yeah, this is an old file that I'm working with, so it's not going to be that great. Anyways, okay, so I'm not focused on lighting. I'm not focused on textures right now. I'm just focused on making sure that my characters and the scene is set out properly, laid out properly. So I need to create a camera. I'm going to lock my pawns, my characters, and I'm going to start animating or not so much animating, but at least posing out my characters. So I'm going to go to create camera, and I'm not going to pick any of these other more advanced cameras, just the simple cameras, all we need. I'm also going to split my screen up. So I'm just going to leave my camera where it is for now. I'm going to go to panels, layouts, 3 panes split top. And this bottom pane, I'm going to switch it from this front view. I'm going to switch it to panel graph editor. And this is really where a lot of your animation is going to happen. You can pose out your characters in the views, but you're going to do a lot of your work, your blocking and fixing stuff in your graph editor here. And I'll show you that in a second. I'm going to leave this perspective view as is, but this side view, I'm going to switch it to the camera that I've created. So to do that, I have my camera selected. I go to panels and I say look through selected. Now you can see the camera's right at the ground level because I haven't adjusted it. I can either adjust it here in the perspective view, or I can adjust it in the camera view itself by pulling out and rotating around. And I don't know, maybe this is an establishing shot. Maybe my first camera is an establishing shot. So I need to show all the characters wide enough to show, and oh, I showed you guys my my primitive theater version with these characters. My establishing shot was way up here, and I kind of did a rotate in, and it kind of worked with the music. But I don't know, we'll just say I'll start my camera here where I at least want to show, I don't want to be necessarily perfectly symmetrical, so I'll be off a little bit. And let's just say I'm happy with that camera. So like I've shown you guys how to lock your nodes, you can also lock a camera. So I'm going to select the camera attributes, right click and say lock selected. And I have my gray bars. So if I try to accidentally move my camera because I think it's my perspective view, it's not going to move. I can still move in my perspective view, but my camera is now locked. If I happen to accidentally move my camera when it's locked, let's say I thought it was my perspective view and I zoomed in here and did a couple of changes, and then I realized, oh no, that's my camera view. I want to get back to that was a good camera setup. All is not lost. If you look on your keyboards, next to the P, to the right of the P, there's a left bracket, and then next to that is a right bracket. If you hit the left bracket, it takes you backwards through the camera positions that you've accidentally or intentionally set. And I think, yeah, that's probably where it was. So you can use that to get back to your camera that you wanted, and then go ahead and relock it. Or if you want to adjust it, then you just unlock it and then just relock it when you're done. So let's say to start off, let's say this is just an opening game. So white moves first, and we don't have really our appropriate texture to show a chessboard. But let's say this is our king pawn. So I'm going to move that character first. But before I move it, I don't know how many of these characters I'm going to move yet. But I'm going to key them all, not at 1, but I'm going to change this to 100. And let's say, I don't know, I'll give myself 200 frames over here. I don't know how long my actual animation is. One way to think about it, though, is 24 frames in a second is pretty close to 25 frames in a second. So the way I like to work is in increments of 25, because each 25 frames is pretty close to a second. Instead of having to do the math with 24, 48, whatever comes after that, 96 or whatever, 108, or I don't know what it is. I'm going to work on 25, 50, 75, 100. Those are numbers that are much easier for us to think about. We're more familiar with those. So in my perspective view, so again, just as a reminder, I restricted my board so I don't accidentally select my board. I restricted my characters so I don't accidentally move them. And now I have my cons on their own separate layer. And I want those unrestricted so I can just make a marquee around these things. And it looks like my actual geometry of my characters, my mesh is selected, but it's not. Because they're parented, we went back, if we go back through this and look at the hypergraph, each of these characters has geometry and a NURBS curve and a group. This is what we would call our con null right here. But each one of these has their own NURBS circle. And of course, I didn't spend the time, I should have, but at some point, maybe I will. Each one of these pawns and characters should have their own control that's named specific to that character. But in the meantime, I'm just going to select all my controls, and you may do this for your own characters as well. And I'm going to hit S at frame 100. And then I'm going to go to I'm going to hold down the Alt button and hit the greater than sign. And the greater than sign is 2 buttons to the right of the M, as in Mary, on your keyboard. So here's 100. I hold down the Alt button. I hit the greater than sign. And you can see that takes me to frame 101. I'm going to hit S again. So if I hold down Alt and keep hitting the greater than sign, it takes me frame by frame. If I hold down Alt and hit the less than sign, it takes me frame by frame through the time slider. But let's say I wanted to do something with this pawn at frame 101. So here's my king pawn. So I keyed it at frame 101. So another thing to think about is your audience is going to need time to understand the establishing shot. So let me go back to the establishing shot. Here's my camera 1. So if I just give, I see, and I did this as a student as well. Oh, before I talk about that. So we've keyed our character at 101. We've keyed all of our characters at 101. I'm going to now go ahead and change this from 100 to 101. And with these characters, they don't have arms, they don't have facial controls, they don't have legs. So this is okay, but I want you guys to get in the habit of keying your characters at the safety frame at 100 and then never showing your safety frame to your audience. So in other words, you should never show your characters in their default pose like this to your audience when you're actually animating. In layout, mine are that way because I haven't. Mine are all standing characters. I have to model my characters and rig them. But for now, so at 101, I key it at 101. But I'm not going to have anything really happen until 125. Again, I'm going to let my audience. I'm going to give them at least a second to appreciate. Okay, this is chessboard. There's a white side and there's a left side, and I'm sorry, there's a light side and a dark side, and there's some funky checkerboard pattern. Maybe this isn't chess, maybe this is disco, I don't know. So you've given your audience time to think. So at frame 125, I'm going to go ahead and hit S again. So from 101 to 125, nothing is really happening. We're just giving the audience time to understand what they're seeing. So let's say it takes my character from 125 to, let's say it takes him a whole second. So at 150, let's say he's going to move from where he's at to this box up here. So you can see that he just popped in there. And the reason he popped from frame 125 to 150 instead of slowly getting there is because I have my animation preferences set to clamped for tangents in, and I have the tangents out set to step. So let me show you how to do that. So first, a couple more things that I want to make mention of is this little button here. It's called the auto keyframe toggle. You want to make sure that that's set. If it's grayed out like this, it's not gonna be useful to you, obviously. So you turn it on, and what it does, actually, let me turn it off and show you what it does if you don't have it set. Let's say I wanted this guy at 160 to move forward, and then at 170 to move, I don't know, you can already see, as soon as I took my character off 160, as soon as I dragged it in the time slider, 160 disappeared. It doesn't remember those frames if I don't hit S. It remembers 150 because I hit S. But now watch, if without hitting S, if I just turn on the auto keyframe toggle and I go to 160, and then I drag him forward, as soon as I drag him forward, because this is on, you can see it automatically puts a tick mark there. So like I said, I want to go to 170. Maybe I'll drag him over to the left at 170. As soon as I drag it, as soon as I make any changes, it remembers that. It saves it. It not only saves it here, but it also saves it here in the channel box. So keep that auto keyframe toggle on. Now, if we open up the animation preferences, you want playback speed to be 24 frames FPS, frames per second times 1. We can play them slower just to see what it looks like, but for the most part, we're going to be watching everything in 24 frames per second. Also, the update view, you want to set this to all, not active. And what that means is if this, if this was animated and it was only set to the active viewer, if I had this viewer active, then it would show me the updating animation only in the camera view, but it wouldn't show me the perspective view. And this is really useful for, especially like in a walk cycle. You want to see the character walking from the front view and the side view to make sure that you're shifting weight and all that kind of thing. So if you just leave it set to all, it'll update automatically. The other thing to set is this animation settings here, settings, and go to animation. And yours might already be set to this, but if it's not, go to tangents and then default in tangent. You can see mine is set to clamped, and then default out tangent, set that to stepped. And I don't remember if I ever showed you guys this, but this is an important thing to remember also to go ahead and do. So under settings, at the very bottom, there's an undo, or near the bottom, there's an undo button. Click that and make sure it's set to undo on, Q is infinite, and then save it. So as long as your file is open, and it's set to infinite, you should be able to go back and undo all the way back to the beginning of the time that you opened the file and you didn't have any controls, I'm sorry, any movement or any commands that you gave Maya. All right, so I've moved this character a couple of times. He's not really telling a story, and I don't really have a story built for this, but let's just say we move it from 125 to 150. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these other frames. So to delete frames, I have my control handle selected, I'm going to hover my mouse in the graph editor. In fact, I'm going to hold down the Alt button and right mouse drag. And you can see this is actually the dark area. If I drag out, there's a light segment. This is the same thing. This is basically from 101 to 200. And you can adjust that here. If I wanted to show less, fewer frames, I can drag this little square here to the left until I get to the frames that I want. So maybe I just really want to focus on what's happening from 101 to 125 or whatever. But like I said, I want to go to 200, or maybe you can do the opposite. If you just want to focus on 25 to 170, you can adjust the little squares, holding down the squares and left mouse dragging until you get to 170 on this side. And then drag this guy up to, I don't know, frame 125, I guess. So if you know there's nothing happening from 101 to 125, just to save yourself the time of seeing the same animation over and over where there's nothing happening, you can just focus on those animated frames. And then actually working in the graph editor, we're going to get a lot more into this, but just to give you some tips on how to work in it. This seems really small. You can hold down Alt and zoom in with a right mouse button. You can also use holding down Alt and use the middle mouse button to pan around. If you hold down Alt, because this is two-dimensional, there's no rotation. So in the perspective view, if you hold down Alt and you use the left mouse, you can rotate or orient around, orbit around in your perspective view or in your camera view if it wasn't locked. You can't do this in this view, just like you can't do it in the front view, because that's it's only two-dimensional, so you can't orbit around. Another thing about using the mouse in the graph editor, again, I would recommend holding down the Alt button and pushing it down, the middle mouse button, the roller, as so it acts as a third mouse button, and you can pan around that area. You can roll it and you can zoom in. The problem is, just like in here, it has this stepped zoom in. It's not a smooth zoom in. Like if you hold down Alt and you zoom in with the right mouse, holding down the right mouse, that's a lot smoother. And same thing here. So I wouldn't recommend using the mouse to zoom in and out. Another thing, sometimes, especially when we get into more animation and this is a lot longer and you have more controls, it may get kind of hard to see all the controls. And it's important to note all the controls that we have, the attributes that we have in the NURBS, in the channel box for each of these control handles, they're also present here in the graph editor. And you can isolate them. Let's say I moved them forward and translate. If I hit W, I can see that it's a blue arrow, and that's translate Z. So you can see what my animation looks like from 125 to 150. There's that step there. And if I wanted to maybe increase it or decrease it, I mean, I could just move them forward here. And you can see as soon as I do that, or I move them back, you can see it drops in that Y-axis in this graph editor. Or another way, there's a couple different ways you can change. You can select the little tick mark and you can change it here. Let's say instead of 3.718, I hit 4. You could put in whole numbers if you want, or you can make a marquee around this button, hold down Shift, and if you middle mouse click on the middle mouse button, holding it down, it gives you a question mark, and it's asking which axis do you want to pull it in. I'm going to pull it in the Y-axis, which is up and down, and you can see as I do that, I'm controlling the character's movement from the graph editor. So yeah, that'll help you. Just there's a lot of different ways to do the same to do this, to get the same thing done in Maya. And that's with a lot of softwares. But let's say I want him there. So let's say at 150 he moves forward, and then 150 plus 25 is 175. Oh, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and delete 160. I decided I don't want those. So if I just delete this one, I only have the translate Z visible, but you can see he still moves over at 170 because I didn't have translate X highlighted. So if I'm going to delete a frame, I need to make sure to select everything. And now you can see, here's my 170, here's my 150, I deleted 160. So I'm going to hit S at 150. I don't have anything happening at 160. I'm going to delete 170. Oops, that's not what I wanted. All right, so that's my first character movement. Now I'm going to go over to the black side and they're going to move their character. Their champion's going to come out. Let's say it's this guy. He's going to confront him. So I've already keyed this guy at frame 101. The last guy I keyed was at 150. And I wanted to animate this guy a second after his animation. So I'm going to key him moving forward at 175. S. Oops, let's see. In fact, maybe I should just remind myself, this guy's, well, so he's going to take 25, he's going to take a second to get here also. So I'm going to start him at 150. I'm going to hit S at 150 also. And then at 175, I'm going to drag him forward to confront his opponent. So if we just, I'm going to hover my mouse in the camera view and I'm going to tap the space bar. And I'm going to hit the, go to the start of the playback range. So we'll start at 101. If I hit play, nothing happens until 150. So that's 150, that's 160. So I'm just, you know, getting my characters out there. Maybe at this point, maybe I want to zoom in here. I want to have another camera that will show me their emotions. So I'm going to create a new camera. I'll create cameras. And this will be my camera too. And I would name, in fact, this is an important thing that I'm doing right now. I'm labeling my cameras. Let me undo this for a second. I'm gonna back up to, I'm gonna minimize Maya for a second. You guys can still see my screen? I'm gonna show you how my production schedule has changed because I've adjusted it quite a bit to be more effective for me, to do what I need it to. So I'm gonna show you my production schedule, thesis project schedule. Okay. So I pretty much worked out that my animation, my thesis project, my 10-minute thesis project is going to be at least 3 scenes long. So you can see scene 1 has a total of 16 cameras, 16 different shots or cameras. Oops, 16. And then I'm working on scene 2 right now, and I only have 5 cameras set up for that. But the important thing is I label these. So the beginning number is my scene number and then an underscore. And then the 01 tells me what camera. So I'm pretty confident I'm never going to get to 100 cameras for scene 1. So 01 is good. I just need to, I don't want to have just 1_1 because at some point you can see here, I needed to get to 10. And if I didn't have a 0 before all these numbers, then 10 is going to go before, it's going to throw off my numbering. So at least have 2 digits there, 01, 02, whatever. So this is how I named my cameras. And you can see that I keep track of how long that camera lasts, as well as I'm going to create a time code for my audio guy. But for now, I'm going to call this camera, let's see, where's my camera? So let me get back in here to Maya. Yeah. All right, so I have to look for my camera in my, here's my camera. So I'll call this cam 1_01. In fact, I'm going to copy that because my next camera is going to be named similar to that. So I'm going to create a new camera. And I'm going to call this one, I'm going to paste it, but I'm going to delete that last one and replace it with a 2. So this is my camera 2. I'm going to look through that one, look through selected, and I'm going to position it so that I'm looking at those characters. They're in each other's faces. They're about to do battle. Oops, rotate around here. Maybe I'll have them even closer. Or maybe for tension, maybe I'll start here. Okay, so camera 1 was animated from 101 to 200. I'm going to start camera 2 at frame 200. So I'm going to switch these numbers down here from 200 to 201. Maybe I'll give it another 100 frames or so. 300. All right. And so let's say, well, I'm not going to lock it just yet because I'm actually going to do a pull in. So 201 to maybe, I don't know, maybe this whole camera is just pulling forward. So I'm going to start it at frame 100. I'm sorry, at frame 201, and I'm going to hit S. And I'm going to look for it in my graph editor. You can see it here. It's keyed at 201. Let's say I'm going to go to all the way to 300, and I'm just going to do a slow truck in. So the characters, I'm not going to really worry about how smooth their animation is. It's in blocking. But the cameras, I do want to spend time making my cameras look right, because it doesn't do us any good to have the character just jump from there to there. It's a very different feel just popping in there as opposed to slowly transitioning. So I translated it forward in the translate Z. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to everything in that camera, and I'm going to make a linear tangent, and that's just going to make a constant, that camera is going to move at a constant rate from 200 to 300. So if I hit 201 and I hit, start from the beginning and I hit play. Oh, what happened? All right, hold on a second. Something else I missed. Oh, there we go. So I guess it was the X that I also, so I'm just going to take all 3 of these, and I'm going, well, yeah, I'm just going to say linear tangent to all of them. Oops, so it's not linear, that's flat tangent. And I'll get into more detail with the graph editor tools, but for now I'm just using this linear tangent. That's what I'm looking for. So you can see it just slides from 201 to 300. So if I make that, maximize that view by tapping the spacebar, then I hit play, it's zooming in. And maybe that's all I want to have happen for camera 2. It's just a slow truck in. Maybe these guys are even closer, or maybe the next camera would be an even tighter shot. Maybe these guys moved in even closer to each other. Like let's say, I'm going to go to 300 or 301. And I'm going to go back to my perspective view. I'm going to go to 300 to 400 this time. That's not, okay, there we go. 300 to 400. So starting at 301, I'll create a new camera. And you don't necessarily have to create a new camera every time either. But what's good about creating a new camera is we're going to do something that's called playblasting. And let me actually demonstrate playblasting for you. This is going to give us a really rough, and I say rough because the animation's not really animated, it's just more in blocking. But we're not really worried about lighting or rendering or any of that stuff, maybe not even the textures. But I'm going to go back to my camera 1. And I don't want to see this camera here. So in my camera view, I want to turn off other cameras. So it's only showing me my characters, it's showing me my camera name, and it's showing me my frame count. To show the frame count, I'm going to go to display, heads up display, and then current frame. If I turn that off, you can see that disappears. Display, heads up display, current frame. So also what we don't want to see is our NURBS curves. I turned them off. Did I turn them off? Oh, you know what? My NURBS curves are on. So yeah, I'm going to turn off my NURBS curves. I'm going to go to show NURBS curves off. So even if I was in 5, I'm not going to see my NURBS curves. We don't, especially with characters around their heads and all the controls that we made, we don't want to focus on that. We just want to focus on the geometry and the story that it's telling. So I'm going to go back to 6, and my NURBS curves are off. It's showing me my camera name. If yours isn't showing your camera name, just go to display, has it display camera names, and you want to leave that on. And I'll show you why in a second. So that's setting up your your Playblast for your Playblast. And then you're going to right click on the timeline down here and go to the Playblast button at the very bottom and say options. And I'm not sure what you guys have at school. Here at home, I don't have a lot of options in my format. I only have like AVI and image. Ideally, you would have you would be able to create an MOV file with QuickTime, and you can do some encoding or whatever. H264 is a good encoder because it compresses it nicely. But for now, I'm just going to leave quality on. I'm going to leave my ornaments, and I have to give it a specific name. So this is camera 1. So I'm going to call it cam1_01. And I'm also going to go to browse, because Maya, you can see that Maya automatically defaults to put these movies, these little movies into the movies folder in your primitive theater folder. So this is a big reason why you want to be using your primitive theater, creating your primitive theater directory and applying your folders. You don't want it to save to the default folder or to your lab computer, the computers at the lab, because then you're not going to have them. So I'm going to, so I can see that it's putting it in the right folder. Then down here, file name, I hit Control C so I could copy it, and I'm going to hit Control V. That's one thing about Maya I don't really like. For some reason, it makes you, if I cancel this, actually, let me just cancel and show you again. So I'm going to right click here. I'm going to go to Playblast options, and this is not the name. So if I type in cam1_01, and then if I go to browse, oh, also make sure you have save to file turned on, because that's going to let you browse and put it in the right folder. If I say browse, you can see that I have to type it again. And I don't think that's, I think I should fix that. It's kind of redundant, but I've gotten in the habit of copying from this window, Control C, and then I go to browse and make sure it's in the right folder. And then I hit Control V. So now it's named properly and it's in the right file, and I'm going to hit save. And then I hit Playblast. And what it's doing is actually going through, oh, you know what? I didn't animate frame or camera 1. This is camera 1, but it's not in the right time. So that's a lot of going back and forth between your Playblasts. So camera 1 was originally set 101 to 200. And I don't know that you want to be that simple with it. You might, depending on what your audio does or whatever. So this is what I wanted to show, the pawn coming out and then the other pawn coming out. All right. So I'm going to replay blast that with the correct timing. And this is already set. It already has it in the right movie file, the correct folder, the right name. So I'm going to hit play blast. And it's asking me if I want to override it. I say yes. All right, so that's camera 1. And so then I move on to camera 2. I would tap my space bar. That's camera 1. Here's camera 2. This is the close-up camera. And this one, and if you wanted to, another way I've done this in the past, I've actually named my camera the frames, but you don't necessarily have to do that. As long as you keep track of, as long as you have your camera count on, it'll show you what frames there are. So I'm going to switch this to 201. And then switch this to 301 or 300. And this is, again, the slow truck in, building some tension between my characters. Yeah, you can see the camera. If I zoom into my perspective view, you can see the camera slowly trucking in. All right, so I'm going to switch. So I'm in camera 1 here. I need to be in camera 2. Even though this says camera 2, I have it selected. I'm not in camera 2. So I'm going to say panels. I can either go to perspective and switch it to camera 2, or if I have it selected, I can go look through selected. I'm going to tap the space bar so it's maximizing my view. Playblast options. And I'm just going to switch this 1 to a 2 here and hit Playblast. So there's my tension shot, my build up. These guys are getting in each other's faces or whatever, or maybe I need to pull it in closer. So that's really where I want you guys to be right now, is have your assets all in the proper file scene, so that you can start knocking out your cameras. And your animation is just selecting, again, you're going to animate from the MSR that we created for each character, and just pulling that forward or to the left or the right or whatever. You don't have to worry about getting it beautifully animated. We're just trying to get it in the correct positions in blocking. But your camera, you want to try to start figuring out where your camera needs to be to tell your story. And then you're going to make a Playblast out of that, like I did. And make sure that it's properly named and showing your frame count, showing your camera name, and that it's putting it in your movies folder of your primitive theater drive. You guys have any questions about that? Working in layouts, starting to lay out your scenes? All right,
No,
I'm gonna
nothing
go ahead
I can think of.
Okay. Anybody else before I stop sharing and stop recording? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop this. I gotta stop recording.